Hi everyone, Ryan Duffy here from Precision Microbes.
Hi, Tommy Heffernan here, Precision Microbes. Welcome back to Tech in 10. Just before we went live there, Ryan was slagging me because I can't spell our topic today, which is...
You can rarely spell, so I'm very surprised. Photosensitization.
Yeah, it's a big one. Again, we're doing what you asked us to do. People have asked us to cover this topic. Have we anything new? I'm not sure we do. We're going to try and cover it. Matthias, you can press go. So this, we shouldn't take 10 minutes today, Ryan, but photosensitization, I suppose when I think about it, I think about skin and how it presents maybe, and then maybe systemically, I can't spell that word, how it presents as well, or what's the underlying issue.
Okay.
So when you think of photosensitization, I suppose we're thinking about how the animals present, first of all. What are we saying when we talk about photosensitization?
Yeah, well, you're getting those sort of ulcers and sort of like crusting and stuff like that in and around places where there's no hair, or there's there's white pigment, or there's lack of pigment and stuff like that.
So your muzzle, underneath the tail, ears,
teeth,
scrotum, udder, okay. Right, so we're getting...
places that are incredibly sensitive, let's just put it that way.
Okay. And we're getting inflammation there, okay? And these animals are presenting moderate, they can be just off behavior, to severe, where you can actually see that severe inflammation. You can see crusting of that skin. It's very, very obvious. Percentage of animals that present with it, okay? It's kind of, it's an unusual one to cover, but it's not a very common disease in the sense that it can be 1% of herds, maybe less. Certain breeds of cattle get it. Sometimes you see it in sheep as well, but it's typically fairly small. I've seen it at herd level twice, I think.
So it'd be more of an individual issue rather than herd?
It seems to be from the presentations, unless there's a specific liver issue, like which we kind of don't tend to see anymore, like maybe a liver fluke issue would probably be an underlying risk for cattle and sheep in Ireland.
Okay.
Right, so let's go back to so have we covered enough on what we're seeing, but let's understand why is it occurring?
Yeah, well, there's a build-up of photodynamic agents within the skin for a variety of reasons.
Okay.
Next thing, ultraviolet light is coming in.
Okay, so photodynamic. So what do you mean by photodynamic agents?
Well, it could be a build-up of, a certain chemical. It could be a certain fungus. It can be certain plants.
St. John Wort is the one they always blame. I've never seen the plant myself, but they always talk about St. John's Wort.
Yeah, no, that definitely would be one. Ragwort, all of those sort of things would be in there. We can talk about it whenever we kind of classify photosensitization, which would be into primary and into secondary classifications.
So these agents come in and they're produced and the UV light reacts with them.
UV light comes in, a massive release of photochemical energy as a consequence, and that results in inflammation and the crusting and stuff that we see.
Okay. So that's primary, the ingestion, or you said even actually, I learned something before we started here. You can say, I always thought it was ingested, but actually it can be actual topically physical activity as well.
Yeah, direct contact can cause it in certain circumstances, but usually whenever we're talking it from a veterinary perspective, it's indirect contact. Okay,
so then there's secondary. So talk about secondary, and I think we see probably more of this in Ireland than other countries.
Yeah, so secondary is where there's something circulating in the bloodstream that's subsequently going to build up into the skin. So even if we go back to the likes of plants and stuff that we've just been discussing, there's a build up for whatever reason, usually put down to hepatobiliary disease, so a compromised liver.
Okay.
And we get a build-up of this metabolite from chlorophyll known as pyeloerythrin, and that's incredibly reactive with ultraviolet light. Okay. And that's not conjugated, it's not excreted in the bile, and therefore it builds up in the skin. And sure, look, there's plenty of UV light exposure to grazing animals, so that's why we start seeing these things.
The person who asked us about it recently was actually saw it in heifers going out, like 4-month-old heifers are going out to pasture for the first time. They had 2 out of like 30, which was a lot. Any thoughts on why that would be occurring? And it seemed to be very, very early on. So,
and what breed was it?
It was Holstein Friesian heifers.
So again, it would fit into that sort of white hair or lack of pigment around that mucocutaneous junction, where you'd start seeing issues like that. Could there be a genetic link? Of course there could be. Is it more likely that they've been all exposed to something very common? Common things are common. That's usually where a vet would investigate first. Okay. So it'd be a matter of trying to work out what has induced a primary or a secondary photosensitization. So in that regard, there are plants and there are chemicals for both.
Okay.
So Primary, as we said, is where there's a build-up of phytoerythrin. What sort of plants would you be incorporating in there? You know, you'd be looking at the likes of your St. John's wort and stuff like that. Chemicals, even the likes of your sulfonamides and tetracyclines.
Okay.
If you ever take a course of tetracyclines, the doctor will often tell you, stay out of the sun,
Right.
particularly if you're on it long term.
Wow.
Usually if you're only on it for a week, they won't, but if you're on it long term for whatever reason, like likes of Q fever, farmers who have been exposed to Q fever put on tetracyclines for a long time, so they are told to stay out of the sun, which is very hard in that occupation. Secondary photosensitization, that would be more so hepatobiliary disease, so liver disease.
Liver fluke seems to be the common one that I would have seen.
Yeah, liver fluke. Even animals with liver abscesses. So whenever we see it with finishing bulls where they have massive burns along their back, if you're in the factory, you'd see liver abscesses. Could that potentially be the cause of compromised liver function? Of course it could be. Now, what else could cause it? You've already alluded to fluke. You know, look, there's a lot of fluke in Ireland under the grazing system. So could that also be causing it? Of course it could. Of course it could.
So these animals present quite sore. They can be moderately inflamed. So if you're getting an animal presenting this time of year with that thing, always good to check under the vulva, look for that swelling maybe in the bag or the scrotum, etc., around the muzzle. Again, working with your own vet. So typically, I don't have anything new on this, a bit boring. It's because the skin's inflamed and anti-inflammatory is kind of key. Plus or minus UV light. So I still think, you know, remove from source. People say that, I've heard different owners say that by the time you're seeing it, there's not much point in removing from light. I always go with an anti-inflammatory, remove light, and then put some topical creams on inflamed skin. But if other people are saying you don't need to leave them out when they're presented.
Well, we know that it's an insult, so unless we find the plant or the chemical that's contributing to it, we can definitely remove this very easily by putting animals inside. So it's put them in, treat them, and try and work out, is St. John's wort floating around? Is there a bit of
Never found it.
Do you know what it looks like?
I had Google on my phone at the time, but I never found it. But it's the one that always is commonly blamed. There must be other plants in there we don't know about. Because if I was looking at it, it's still a small occurrence, but definitely there's a slight trend up. And I think, you know, obviously when you see weeks like this and maybe warmer summers, you might be inclined to see more of it. So maybe it's worth exploring if there's other risk factors.
Well, like even perennial ryegrass has been found to cause photosensitization in rare cases. I know we talk St. John's wort and ragwort and stuff like that. Echium, I've seen that in sheep where they've gone into a garden and they've bloody started consuming that, and we ended up seeing photosensitization in those circumstances. Even there in New Zealand, where I used to work, like facial eczema would be a massive one down there, and that's caused by a fungus known as Epithomyces chartarum, and that could potentially be here. We have a grazing system very similar to them. Do we have it? It's never been actually found, but again, could that be, you know, implicated in that particular scenario where you have heifers where there's only a few of them and they've been affected very quickly? Could be.
Yeah, and I think anti-inflammatories, my experience is, again, not just one. They need them for, you know, probably, you know, if you're given something that's a bit long acting, for at least, you know, 2 or 3 shots to get inflammation down. It's
a very aggressive inflammatory process. So yeah, completely agree.
Have you anything else to add? This is our shortest Tech in 10 yet. We're usually just using up our time. So we've been asked, we covered it the best we can. Anything else, Ryan?
No, I think we've done the best that we can do.
With Tech in 10. Okay, again, if you have questions, if you want us to cover a topic, we're covering a topic each week, just drop us a DM or a comment, etc., or email.
Ryan.Duffy@precisionmicrobes.com
or info@precisionmicrobes.com, and you can we'll try and cover a topic.
Brilliant.
That's it.